Hey everybody, Rob Bender here with GPS Dairy Consulting, reporting from the field today of one of my clients to talk to you today about cow health and production. And you may be wondering why I'm standing in the middle of an alfalfa field if I'm talking about cow health. Well, as you know, forage is a huge component of your rations, probably somewhere between 40 and 70% of total feed in your diet is forage. And alfalfa in particular might make up about a third of that forage, depending on the ration. So it's critical we put up as good a forage as possible so that cows stay healthy. So I'm going to put together a series of short videos here in a vlog for this week to talk about forage production and what we can do to make sure our haylage is as high a quality as possible. The first step in putting up high quality forage is to target the correct time of cutting. And you may have seen us talk about this before, but one of the things you really want to do is make sure to get out, walk your fields, measure the alfalfa, see how tall it is, and perhaps take some samples and send to the lab, scissors clips, to determine where the quality really is at. Oftentimes we're looking at cutting first crop between 24 and 26 inches of height, and that usually corresponds to about 190 RFQ. If we can cut at about 190 RFQ, we usually anticipate losing about 20 points through the harvest and fermentation process. And then when we feed it out, it'll be about 170 RFQ. So depending on your goals, you want to adjust that number, but factor in about 20 points harvest loss with RFQ. So I'm going to measure my forage right here. Okay, so in this field, I'm looking at about 25, 26 inches for alfalfa height. I did take a scissors clip 2 days ago, and I found out it was about 205 RFQ. So factor in 2 days have passed, so it's matured by 2 days. So I know that it's a little more mature than 205. Since 2 days have passed, they were relatively cloudy days. I can probably plan on losing 3-4 points a day. So this stuff is probably in the mid 190s and ready to cut. So we're going to be cutting here shortly. Okay, I'm here in a different field that has just been cut. You can see the rows. Nice big field of alfalfa. This field has quite a bit of grass in it. And if you look way far in the distance, you might still be able to see the triple mower back there cutting the remaining part of this field. But one of the pieces I want to talk about here is when we're talking about cow health, one of the things we want to do is try as hard as possible to reduce the ash content in the feed. One way to do this is to target the correct cutting height. So I have my tape measure here, and I'm looking at a cutting height of about 3 inches, 3.5 inches, depending on exactly where you look. We really encourage cutting between 3 and 4 inches, if at all possible, so that we can reduce ash and improve the forage quality. If we can do this, forage quality is better. We reduce our risk of butyric haylage, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit. And again, haylage is the best quality possible. All right, we are getting ready to start chopping here at the dairy. And I want to talk a little bit about another quality parameter that's absolutely critical in making haylage successfully. Dry matter percent or moisture percent is probably the most important factor to making sure you put up quality feed. Our dry matter target is 37 to 45. That's on a dry matter basis. And if you want to think about that in moisture, it's about 55% moisture up to about 63. If you get wetter than that, so if you get wetter than 37 dry matter or 63 moisture, we highly suggest separating those loads off the pile. So if it's just a load or two and you want to keep chopping, fine, that's great. But those couple loads that are too wet, we suggest putting on a separate pile to the side, and we'll feed them up quickly and not have them be part of the main haylage pile. The reason for that is once you get above about 63% moisture, 37 dry matter, once you get wetter than that, you run a really high risk for butyric acid formation and fermentation. And so moisture, above 63 moisture, is one of the main risk factors. And once you get butyric acid formation, that's the really stinky, slimy green layer. that happens in the feed as it sits for a long period of time, as it ferments for a long period of time. So once you get butyric acid formation, you can really have digestive health issues with your cows. So putting up the right moisture feed, right dry matter feed, is absolutely critical to cow health so that you can keep your cows healthy and prevent those digestive upsets, HBS style problems in cattle. So how do you check moisture? Well, there's a few good ways of doing it. You could trust your chopper NIR if it's calibrated correctly. You could take a sample and put it on a Coster tester. Any of those ways. Some people just have really calibrated their hands, honestly, to work really well in getting pretty close on moisture. But whatever you do, don't put it up wetter than about 63 moisture. All right, the next part of the process I want to talk about is filling and packing. This is another very key step, and the goal here is to compress the forage enough to drive out as much oxygen as possible. To do this, we want to have tractor weight on the pile. How much tractor weight do you want? That's a common question we get. If you weigh your tractors and abide by the rule of 800, so you take your total tractor weight and divide by 800, that'll give you roughly the number of wet tons per hour that you can bring in during harvest. And if you don't have enough, you either got to get more tractors on the pile, more weights on the tractors, or you got to slow the chopper down, and nobody wants to slow the chopper down. So the goal here is to get it compressed enough to get about 18 to 20 dry matter pounds per cubic foot once it's all packed. This will result in really good and efficient fermentation and aerobic stability on the pile. So that's the packing story. Okay, last but not least, covering and sealing. This is another really important step so that, just like packing where we're trying to get all the oxygen out as much as possible, we want to cover and seal it so that oxygen can't penetrate the top layer and cause mold and spoilage from occurring. So we use a heavy plastic and then apply some weight in the form of tires to keep the oxygen out. My personal preference would be to have tire to tire across the whole pile with very little or no overlapping of tires so that there's maximum contact between the tires and plastic to keep oxygen out. And then in addition, I really prefer having something to seal the edge so that oxygen can't get underneath the edge into the forage underneath. So on this dairy, we're using gravel bags, little bags filled with gravel that can seal the edge. The bags then have contact with plastic, which has contact with concrete. So there's no feed underneath those bags, underneath the plastic. There's straight contact with the concrete to get a really good seal and prevent oxygen from penetrating. I think that's a big opportunity I see at dairies where the edges do have a fair bit of spoilage on the side of these piles because oxygen is still getting underneath. So thanks for tuning in for this week's vlog around forage quality and cow health in particular. Hope to see you again.